an alpha king who reigned with storm-gray eyes and a heart of ice, humbled by the one woman he thought would always be his. She was Annie Gerber, the healer who mended his soul, the Luna who anchored his throne, his fated miracle. He had a kingdom of obsidian and blood at his command, but he traded it all for the poison of a sister's lies and the hollow thrill of a fake bond. He thought she was weak. He thought she would fade away. Until one rain-slicked night, under the judgment of the blood moon, she stood before the entire pack and uttered the words that executed his future. I, Annie Gerber, reject you as my king and my mate. The thunder didn't just roll over the Shearer dynasty, it roared, matching the erratic power of the man who sat upon its throne. Blackthorne Palace stood as a jagged monument to absolute power, its towers clawing at a sky thick with the scent of ozone and ancient magic. Inside the grand hall, torches flared blue with wolf fire, casting flickering shadows over the elite warriors of the Shearer pack. At the center of it all was King Tyler Shearer. He was a vision of midnight and muscle, a man whose raven-black hair fell over eyes that held the cold, gray fury of a winter gale. He wore heavy obsidian armor that seemed to absorb the light, his jaw set in a line so sharp it commanded silence without a single word. Every alpha in the realm feared him. One glance from Tyler could quell a rebellion, and one tilt of his head could send 1,000 men to the grave. But Tyler was a king on the edge of a precipice. His power was too vast, too wild, a hurricane trapped in a man's chest. For years, the Shearer line had struggled to contain the beast within, and many feared Tyler would be the last of his name, consumed by his own inner storm. Then the doors opened, and the storm stilled. Annie Gerber walked in. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a princess. She was a healer's daughter, dressed in simple linen robes the color of morning mist, her hair falling in soft, loose waves that seemed to catch the torchlight. Where Tyler was a tempest, Annie was the calm. Her hands had mended the broken and pulled warriors back from the brink of the abyss. When their eyes met, his storm gray against her gentle forest green, the world shifted. It wasn't just a pull, it was a collision. The mate bond snapped into place with the force of a physical blow. The court went silent as Tyler rose from his throne, his movements predatory yet reverent. He stopped before her, towering over her, his breath hitching as her scent, clover and honey, invaded his senses. In that moment, he was saved. But as he looked at Annie, his eyes didn't just see a mate, they saw a remedy. And that was his first mistake. If you're still here, it's because you know the weight of a secret kept and a heart shattered. But ask yourself, if you were Annie, would you have the strength to walk away, or would you let a broken king pull you back into the shadows? This is Liana's Moonshadow Tales. Don't leave your Luna waiting. We love bringing these stories to you, but it is essential and equally important that we receive your subscribers in order to continue bringing content. The coronation of Daniela Gerber was not a celebration. It was an execution of tradition. The scent of clover and honey that once defined the Shearer throne room had been replaced by the cloying, heavy stench of nightshade and musk. King Tyler sat upon his obsidian throne, his fingers digging into the stone armrests until the rock groaned. Beside him, Daniela lounged in Annie's former seat, draped in blood-red silks that shimmered like fresh wounds. "You look tense, my king," Daniela whispered, her voice a sharp contrast to Annie's melodic tones. She reached out, her fingers trailing down Tyler's jawline. Tyler stiffened. Every instinct in his Lycon soul screamed. When Annie touched him, it felt like a cooling balm on a feverish wound. But Daniela's touch felt wrong. It was like static against his skin, a jarring artificial heat that made his wolf, Ironhide, pace restlessly in the cage of his mind. The bond should have felt like a golden thread, but this felt like a leaden chain. "The borders are restless," Tyler rasped, his voice sounding hollow even to his own ears. "The warriors are whispering about the blood moon. They say the goddess is angry. Daniela let out a cold, mocking laugh. The warriors are superstitious fools. They see omens in every shadow because they miss the healer Luna and her soft ways. I am a queen of fire, Tyler. Isn't this what you wanted? Strength? Passion? She leaned into his space, her predatory posture forcing him to look at her. Tyler stared into her dark eyes, searching for the spark he felt during the rejection ceremony. It was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating ambition. A flash of Annie's face, tear-stained and defiant as she uttered the rejection, flickered in his mind. He pushed it down. He was a king. He did not make mistakes. To admit that the bond with Daniela felt like a sickness would be to admit he had thrown away his soul for a lie. I wanted a mate who could stand beside me, Tyler said, his voice hardening with forced conviction. And you have her, Daniela smirked, her eyes glinting. She signaled to a servant, who brought a goblet of dark, swirling wine. Drink, Tyler. It will settle your wolf. It's a special blend, to ensure our power remains absolute. Tyler took the cup, unaware that the bitterness of the wine was the taste of his own slow destruction. Pride was a dangerous crown, and as he drank, the walls of Blackthorne Palace seemed to grow colder, sealing him into a reign built on ash. The northern wilds did not care for the titles of kings or the heartbreak of Lunas. Here, the wind was a razor, and the snow was a shroud. Deep within a cave, hidden by the jagged frostbite peaks, Annie Gerber clung to a furs-covered stone, her knuckles white as she weathered another contraction. Breathe, child. The moon is watching over you, a gravelly voice commanded. Jillian, the iron-haired she-wolf advisor, who had smuggled Annie out of the Shearerlands, moved with a grace that defied her years. She cast a handful of dried herbs into the small fire, the smoke curling around Annie like protective spirits. Annie let out a ragged scream that was swallowed by the howling blizzard outside. Her linen healer robes were tattered, her body lean from weeks of travel, but her forest-green eyes burned with a new, terrifying resolve. She wasn't just a healer anymore. She was a mother fighting for a legacy Tyler had tried to erase. I can't! Jillian, it's too much! Annie gasped, sweat stinging her eyes. You are the daughter of healers and the mate of a king, Jillian hissed, her iron-gray eyes flashing. You will bring this alpha into the world, or you will die trying. Push! With a final, soul-shaking cry, the cave was filled with a new sound, a piercing, healthy wail that cut through the wind. Jillian wrapped the infant in thick bearskin furs and leaned in. Her hands froze. Annie, she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. Annie reached out, her arms shaking as she took the bundle. She peeled back the furs, and her heart stopped. The boy was tiny, but he bore the unmistakable mark of the Shearer bloodline. His hair was a shock of raven black. And when his eyes fluttered open, they weren't green. They were storm gray, the exact terrifying shade of King Tyler's eyes. Leo, Annie whispered, her tears falling onto the babe's cheek. As she held him, she felt a strange shift. The phantom pull of the mate bond, which had been a dull ache in her chest, suddenly hardened. It transformed from a longing for Tyler into a protective wall of iron. He has his father's eyes, Jillian noted, her voice grim. No, Annie said, her voice dropping an octave, filled with a coldness that matched the blizzard outside. He has the eyes of a king, but he will be raised by a sovereign. Tyler threw us into the dark, Jillian. He has no idea what kind of monsters we've become to survive it. That night, a new star appeared over the north, a silver moon that signaled the end of Annie the Healer and the birth of the Silver Sovereign. Chapter 4. The Rise of the Silver Sovereign. 5 years had passed, and the map of the continent had been redrawn in blood and silver. The Northern Territories, once a lawless wasteland of rogue packs and outcasts, had been forged into a single, terrifying entity, the Silver Domain. At the center of the Frost Keep, a fortress built of reinforced steel and enchanted stone, Annie Gerber stood on the battlements. She was no longer the soft girl in linen. She wore silver moon-plated armor that hugged her form like a second skin, draped in the heavy furs of a white alpha wolf she had hunted herself. Her forest green eyes were no longer deep pools. They were shards of emerald glass, unreadable and lethal. "The scouts have returned, Sovereign," a voice boomed. Luis, the massive, scarred alpha who had once been a rival, but was now her most loyal commander, stepped forward. He bowed his head, a gesture he offered to no one else. "What news of the South?" Annie asked, her voice like velvet wrapped around a blade. "Blackthorne is rotting," Luis reported, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "Tyler's borders are failing. The unknown shadow, our advance units, have successfully choked their trade routes. They are starving, Annie. Tyler is gaunt, his wolf is sluggish, and Daniela, she rules with a whip, but her people are ready to snap." Annie looked out over her own kingdom. Below her, thousands of wolves moved in disciplined formation. She had done the impossible. She had turned rogues into an army. "Mama!" A small figure darted out from the shadow of the keep. Leo was 5 now, a miniature king in a silver-trimmed cloak. He moved with a predatory grace that made even Luis step back. He held a wooden practice sword, his raven hair windswept. "The training is done?" Annie asked, her expression softening only for him. "I beat the older pups, Mama," Leo said, his storm-gray eyes shining with a fierce pride. "I remembered what you said. Never show your throat to an enemy." Annie knelt, adjusting his cloak. She saw the ghost of Tyler in every line of the boy's face, but she saw her own iron will in his spirit. "Good," she whispered, "because tomorrow we ride south. Not as refugees, but as the answer to a king's prayer. Tyler thinks he is meeting a savior to save his crown." She stood up, her armor catching the moonlight. "Hartai, he is about to find out that the woman he rejected is the only one who can decide if he lives or dies." The great hall of Blackthorne Palace, once a symbol of Lycon might, felt like a tomb. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and the metallic tang of Daniela's medicines. King Tyler leaned heavily on his throne, his obsidian armor feeling like a 1,000-pound weight. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones sharp, and his eyes, once the color of storms, were now a dull ash gray. "You must fight him, Tyler! To refuse is to admit weakness!" Daniela shrieked. She stood before him, her blood-red silks tattered at the hem, her posture erratic. She had spent 5 years poisoning his mind and his body, but the consequences were finally catching up to her. Outside the palace gates, the ground shook with the rhythmic chanting of 1,000 wolves. Luis, the alpha challenger, had arrived. He didn't just want the throne. He wanted to humiliate the silent king who had become a shadow of a man. I am not well, Daniela," Tyler rasped, his voice breaking. "My wolf, Ironhide, he won't wake." "Then force him," she hissed, grabbing his face. Her touch sent a jolt of nausea through him. "If you lose this duel, I lose my crown. Fight!" Tyler stood, his legs trembling. He walked out to the courtyard, where his remaining pack members watched with hollow eyes. Luis stood in the center, a mountain of bronzed muscle and bearskin, his great axe resting on his shoulder. "The king has arrived!" Luis mocked, his voice carrying to the battlements. "Or is it just a corpse in a crown?" The duel was a massacre. Tyler moved like he was underwater. Every strike from Luis felt like a mountain collapsing. Tyler shifted into his wolf form, a massive raven-black beast. But even as a wolf, he was gaunted and slow. Luis's claws tore through Tyler's side, sending him crashing into the dirt. Luis raised his axe for the killing blow. The crowd gasped. Daniela watched from the balcony, her eyes wide with terror. Not for Tyler, but for her own safety. Suddenly, a silver-tipped arrow whistled through the air, embedding itself in the ground inches from Luis's feet. A horn blast echoed from the hills, a sound so pure and powerful it made the ground vibrate. A legion of wolves in silver armor appeared on the ridge, led by a woman on a white stallion. "The duel is over!" The woman's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "So the Shearer lands are now under the protection of the Silver Sovereign." Tyler, bleeding in the dirt, looked up. He saw the rider. His heart, which had been sluggish for years, gave a violent, painful thud. The scent hit him, clover and honey, but now laced with the smell of cold steel and mountain air. "Annie," he whispered, his vision blurring. He had expected a savior. He found a queen who looked at him with more pity than love. The Silver Domain's encampment was a city of tents and steel, erected on the neutral border of the two kingdoms. Tyler walked through the rows of silver-clad warriors, flanked by a few of his remaining battered guards. He felt like a ghost walking among the living. These wolves were rogues, outcasts, the very people he had once looked down upon. Now they were the most disciplined army in the realm. They reached the central pavilion, a massive structure of white silk and iron. The guards at the entrance didn't bow to Tyler. They crossed their spears, their eyes cold. "King Tyler Shearer," the guard announced. "He seeks an audience with the sovereign." Tyler entered. The pavilion was filled with the map of his own kingdom, marked with the positions of the unknown shadow units that had been dismantling his reign. Standing at the head of the table was Annie. She didn't look up immediately. She was pointing to the Blackthorne Pass, giving orders to Jillian and Luis. When she finally turned, Tyler felt the air leave his lungs. She was magnificent. The silver moon armor made her look like a goddess of war. Her hair was braided with silver wire, and her posture was so rigid, so royal, it made his own throne seem like a child's toy. "You look different, Annie," Tyler managed to say, his voice a pathetic croak. Annie's expression didn't change. She didn't offer him a seat. She didn't offer him a smile. "I am different, Tyler. 5 years in the frostbite peaks tends to kill the parts of you that are weak." "I came to ask for an alliance," Tyler said, his pride warring with his desperation. "My pack is starving. Daniela, she says there is a curse on the land." "Daniela is the curse, Tyler," Annie said, stepping closer. The scent of her, the real uncorrupted scent of his mate, nearly brought him to his knees. "She has been poisoning you since the night you threw me out, and you were too arrogant to see it." "I made a mistake," Tyler whispered, the words finally breaking free. "I thought she was the one. But my wolf has been dying ever since you left." "Your wolf is dying because you broke the bond for a lie," Annie said, her voice devoid of heat. "But I didn't come here for your apologies. I came to secure the safety of the northern border. If Blackthorne falls to the ancient evil Daniela has summoned, it threatens my people." "Then help us," Tyler pleaded. "I'll give you anything, land, gold." "I have land, I have gold," Annie countered. "I want the boy to see his heritage." "What boy?" Tyler asked, his brow furrowing. Annie stepped aside. From behind a heavy curtain, Leo stepped out. He looked at Tyler with a cold, analytical gaze. "This is Leo," Annie said, "your son, and the future of the North." Tyler stared at the boy, at his own raven hair, his own storm-gray eyes. The weight of his sin finally crashed down on him, heavier than any obsidian armor. He had rejected his heir, he had rejected his miracle. The realization of Leo's existence hit Tyler like a physical blow. He took a step toward the boy, his hand trembling, but Leo didn't move toward him. Instead, the child stepped closer to Annie, his small hand instinctively finding the hilt of his miniature silver sword. He is my son," Tyler breathed, his voice thick with a sudden, overwhelming grief. "Annie, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe—" "I didn't let you believe anything, Tyler," Annie interrupted, her voice like a guillotine. You made your choice on the blood moon. You declared me unworthy. You said my blood was weak. Did you expect me to come crawling back to beg for a place for my child in a kingdom that hated his mother? Tyler's ash-gray eyes flared with a desperate old fire. I was a fool, but he is a shearer. He belongs at Blackthorne. He belongs with his father. Tyler's voice rose, the old alpha command vibrating in his chest. I am still the king. I command you to return with him. We will fix this. I will strip Daniela of her titles. I will— Annie let out a sound that froze the blood in Tyler's veins. It was a laugh. Not a joyful one, but a short, sharp bark of pure derision. Command me? She asked, her forest green eyes flashing with a terrifying power. She stepped forward, closing the gap between them. Tyler, despite being a head taller, felt himself shrinking. Annie reached out and gripped the collar of his tunic, pulling him down to her level. With her other hand, she swept back the fur on her shoulder, revealing a mark etched into her skin. It wasn't the faint, fading mark of a mate. It was a glowing, silver alpha mark, the sign of a sovereign who had claimed their own territory through blood and trial. Look at this, Tyler, she hissed. I'm no longer your subordinate. I am not a Luna who serves at the pleasure of her king. I am the Silver Sovereign. I rule 3 times the land you do, with an army that would tear your walls down in a single night. She released him, pushing him back. Tyler stumbled, his legs weak from the poison. You have no power here, Annie continued, her voice regaining its icy calm. You cannot command me, and you certainly cannot command my son. You are here as a suppliant, a beggar at my gates. Leo looked up at Tyler, his storm-gray eyes devoid of the warmth Tyler so desperately craved. You hurt Mama, the boy said, his voice high but steady. Jillian said you were a king who lost his way. My mama is a queen who found hers. Tyler looked from the boy to Annie, the crushing weight of his failure making it hard to breathe. He had come to save his kingdom, but he realized now that he had lost the only war that mattered before it even began. The atmosphere in the Silver Pavilion shifted as Jillian stepped out of the shadows. The iron-haired she-wolf carried a small stone bowl, the contents swirling with a sickly violet mist. She set it on the map table between Tyler and Annie. You want to know why your kingdom is rotting, Shearer? Jillian asked, her iron-gray eyes piercing Tyler's soul. You want to know why your wolf is a ghost? Jillian dipped her staff into the bowl and flicked a drop of the liquid onto Tyler's arm. Where it touched his skin, it sizzled, turning black and releasing the stench of decay. Dark magic, Tyler whispered, horror dawning on his face. Daniela, she said it was a tonic for my strength. It was a leash, Jillian corrected. Daniela Gerber knew she was never your fated mate. She found a dark magic weaver in the Eastern Rogues. She used Annie's blood, stolen from her healer's kit, to brew a mimicry draft. It tricked your wolf into feeling a bond that didn't exist. Tyler fell back into a chair, his head in his hands. The rejection ceremony. I felt so certain. I felt a pull. You felt a parasite, Annie said, standing over him. And once she had the crown, she didn't need you strong. She needed you compliant. The tonic she gave you every night was a slow poison designed to wither your alpha spirit so she could rule as regent. Tyler looked up at Annie, his eyes brimming with tears. So, Annie, the moon goddess, she warned me in my dreams. I thought it was just guilt. It was the truth trying to break through the fog, Jillian said. And now, because of her greed, the barrier between our world and the ancient evil has been breached. Daniela didn't just poison you. She offered the Shearer bloodline as a sacrifice to the shadows in exchange for eternal beauty and power. A distant roar echoed from the south, a sound that wasn't a wolf and wasn't human. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated hunger. Tyler stood up, his movements shaky but driven by a new, raw clarity. I have to stop her. If I die, I die. But I won't let her destroy everything because of my blindness." "You can't even stand, Tyler," Annie said, her expression softening just a fraction. She turned to Jillian. "Can you purge it?" "It will be agony," Jillian warned, "and his wolf may not survive the shock." "Do it," Tyler commanded, his storm gray eyes finding Annie's. "I'd rather die as a man who knows the truth than live as a king who serves a lie." The sky over Blackthorne Palace turned the color of a bruised lung. Shadows that moved of their own accord crawled up the obsidian walls, and the air was thick with the screams of those who couldn't escape. At the center of the courtyard stood Daniela, her blood-red silks now black with filth, her eyes glowing with a terrifying hollow light. "He's coming!" she shrieked to the darkness. "The king is coming to reclaim his grave!" From the tree line, the Silver Army emerged. They didn't move like the broken shearer guards. They moved like a wall of moonlight. At the front was Tyler, his skin pale, but his eyes burning with a renewed fierce light after Jillian's purge. Beside him, on her white stallion, was Annie. "Daniela!" Tyler's voice roared, actually shaking the palace gates. "It's over!" "Over?" Daniela laughed, a sound that cracked like breaking bone. She raised her hands, and the shadows solidified into monstrous, wolf-like creatures with glowing red eyes. "I have the power of the abyss. You are nothing but a dying breed." The battle was a symphony of chaos. Annie led her Silver Legion into the fray, her silver-plated armor reflecting the flashes of dark magic. She fought with a lethal precision, her healer's knowledge of anatomy making every strike of her blade a killing one. Tyler fought his way toward the balcony, his wolf, Ironhide, finally awake and screaming for vengeance. He tore through the shadow beasts, his claws dripping with black ichor. As Tyler reached the balcony, Daniela lunged at him with a dagger carved from obsidian. "If I can't have the crown, no one will." She was fast, fueled by the ancient evil, and Tyler was still recovering. He braced for the strike, but a flash of silver intervened. Annie had vaulted the railing, her blade meeting Daniela's dagger in a shower of sparks. The two sisters stared at each other, one a vision of corrupted ambition, the other a sovereign of hard-won light. "You always thought you were better than me," Daniela hissed. "I never thought about you at all, Daniela," Annie replied, her voice cold. "That was your problem." With a flick of her wrist, Annie disarmed her sister and delivered a kick that sent Daniela reeling toward the edge of the balcony. Tyler stepped forward, his hand out, not to save her, but to witness her end. The shadows Daniela had summoned turned on their master, sensing her fear. They swarmed her, dragging her over the edge and into the abyss she had opened. The silence that followed was deafening. The shadows dissipated, leaving Blackthorne Palace a scarred, broken ruin. The dawn broke over the smoking ruins of Blackthorne, a pale, cold sun that offered little warmth. Tyler stood on the palace steps, his armor shattered, his body covered in wounds that would take months to heal. He looked out at his people, starving, terrified, but alive because of the woman who now stood before him. Annie was preparing her horse. The Silver Army was already packed, ready to return to the north. Leo stood beside her, his storm-gray eyes watching Tyler with a strange, new curiosity. "Annie, wait!" Tyler called out, his voice hoarse. She paused, her hand on the saddle. She didn't turn around. Tyler walked down the steps and dropped to one knee. He didn't care that his warriors were watching. He didn't care about his crown. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I threw away the only miracle I ever had. But please, stay. Blackthorne needs a Luna. My people need a healer. I need you." He looked up at her, his storm-gray eyes filled with a raw, desperate hope. "We can start again. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. We can be a family." Annie finally turned. She looked at the man on his knees. She remembered the girl who would have died for a single kind word from him. She remembered the pain of the rejection and the cold of the northern winter. She walked toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder. For a second, Tyler leaned into her touch, a sob catching in his throat. "Tyler," she said softly, "I forgive you." Relief flooded his face, but it was short-lived. "I forgive you for the betrayal. I forgive you for the pain," she continued, her voice steady. "But I cannot be your Luna. That girl died in the snow 5 years ago." She pulled her hand away. "You are a king, Tyler. You have a kingdom to rebuild and a people to lead. Do it for them. Do it to prove you were worth saving." "And Leo?" Tyler asked, his voice breaking. Annie looked at her son. Leo walked over and stood in front of Tyler. The boy reached out and touched the hilt of Tyler's broken sword. "I will come back when the snow thaws," Leo said, his voice a perfect blend of Annie's calm and Tyler's strength. "Mama says I have to learn how to be a king from the man who lost everything, so I don't make the same mistakes." Annie mounted her horse. "You can be his father, Tyler. You can teach him your strength, but you will never again be my master." She signaled to her army. "We ride!" Tyler stayed on his knee as the Silver Sovereign led her legion away. He watched until the silver armor disappeared into the morning mist. He was a king again, and he had his life. But he was alone. He stood up, his jaw tightening, his storm-gray eyes fixing on the ruins of his palace. He had been rejected, and it was a rejection he never expected, but it was the one he finally deserved. If this finale shattered your heart and rebuilt it again, you felt the power of the Silver Sovereign. Hit that subscribe button and join Liana's Moonshadow Tales. Tell me in the comments, did Annie make the right choice by leaving Tyler alone? Or should she have given him one more chance? Your comments keep our moon shining. See you in the next tale.